Very good afternoon to all of you. Honorable Srimati Smriti Irani, former Union Minister of Human Resource Development, our Rector, Professor Brijesh Kumar Pandey, Dean of the School of International Studies, Professor Amitabh Mattoo, dignitaries, ambassadors, our colleagues, scholars and students. Welcome to the Valedictory Session of the Pandit Hriday Nath Kunzru Memorial Lecture Series 2025 on why international relations matter. We've had a really scintillating experience, I think, over the last 4 days with 12 technical sessions ranging from why IR theory, international law, international political economy matters, to why different areas or regions matter. These lectures showcased a range of ideas and perspectives on international relations and area studies scholars, and gave us a flavor of how Indian scholars and policymakers are viewing the world. Despite the various discussions that we've had, what we did really seem to have a consensus on is that the why in the title of the lecture series points towards an explanation of why IR or these regions matter, rather than an interrogation or a question of whether or not it matters. To quote one of the speakers, if someone has a doubt about whether IR or foreign policy matters, I think they should go and get their head examined. These are the exact quotes, because it does. I'm really pleased that we are concluding this year's lecture series with a session on why Bharat Matters, with Honorable Smriti Irani as the speaker. Srimati Irani, perhaps of course she needs no introduction, but nevertheless, let me say a few words. She's a distinguished leader with over 25 years of experience in governance and policy making. She's been cabinet minister with the Government of India for over a decade. She's held pivotal cabinet positions, leading transformative initiatives across the Ministry of Education, Textiles, Women and Child Development, and Minority Affairs. Her leadership is marked by innovative strategies, digital transformation, and a focus on gender equity and sustainable development. She was a young global leader representing India at the World Economic Forum. She is founder, Alliance for Global Good, Gender Equity and Equality, a World Economic Forum initiative aligned with BIMSTEC and G20. During her tenure as minister, she conceptualized the Poshan Tracker, the world's largest platform delivering benefits to about 100 million women and children, earning the National Award for e-governance. She developed flagship national schemes to enable digital delivery of services, overhauled Indian juvenile justice system, conceptualized and led the formulation of NEP. She oversaw the creation of Swayam, India's first massive open online courses platform. And among the many caps that she has worn, she also has had teaching roles. She's been adjunct faculty member at the Indian Institute of Management at Udaipur and Bodh Gaya, teaching public speaking and human resource management. She has certifications in business analytics from University of Cambridge, from Berkeley FinTech program of the University of California. Moreover, she's a published author and fluent in 8 languages. So a very warm welcome to you, madam. Our rector, Professor Brijesh Kumar Pandey, is professor at the School of Sanskrit and Indic Studies. He specializes in yoga, Vedanta and Shaiva philosophy. He's won many awards and honors, such as the Purushottam Milkani Teachers Award by Rashtriya Shaikshic Mahasangh. He's been honored by organizations such as the Sri Sanatan Seva Samiti Halwani, Nainital, and Kavya Ratnam Sansthan. He has also several publications to his name. Our Dean, Professor Amitabh Mattoo, is Professor of International Relations and Foreign Policy. He has a DPhil from University of Oxford in International Relations, serves as Honorary Professor at the University of Melbourne, was the Founding Director at the Australia-India Institute and Deputy Chair of the Advisory Board of the German Institute of Global and Area Studies. He is also former Vice-Chancellor of the University of Jammu and has received the Padma Shri for his contribution to public life in 2009. But most of all, he's a leader with the capacity to carry everyone along with him. So I will now request Professor Mattoo to welcome our guest of honor, Srimati Smriti Irani, with a token of our appreciation. And also welcome Professor Brajesh Pandey. Professor Pandey, I request you to please present a token of our gratitude to Srimati Irani, to Honorable Srimati Irani.
It's heavy.
Sati?
Yeah, it's
It's
heavy.
heavy, sir.
heavy.
It's
It's
very
very heavy.
Yes, sir. Let's approach please.
Thank you.
Professor Mattoo, I will request you now to chair the session.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Professor Preeti Singh. Let me also join you in welcoming a dynamic visionary leader, a steadfast friend whose journey embodies resilience, excellence and versatility, the Honorable Smriti Irani ji. Preeti Singh has given a lengthy introduction, so let me just say that Madam Irani is a champion of women's empowerment, child welfare, economic growth, reform in education. Some of the programs that we use, Gyan and Sparsh, were introduced during her tenure as the Minister for Human Resource Development. She bridges grassroots insights with policymakers. Her journey inspires us to redefine boundaries and embrace diverse paths to impact. Please join me in welcoming a leader, a reformer, and a role model, Madam Smriti Irani, who has just returned from Davos, and I request her to speak and enlighten us with her thoughts on why Bharat Matters. Ma'am.
Namaskar. It's not everybody who gets called Amitabh Mattoo's friend. So at the outset, let me express my gratitude to Mr. Mattoo not only for exclaiming that, but also for his kind invitation. I am not new to GNU. And the last I was in this campus was eating anda paratha and trying to get the exhaust fan switched at a dhaba with students normally progress to. My compliments to Professor Pandey and the entire faculty and team, which has been kind and gracious enough to extend this invite to me and to speak on why Bharat Matters. Given the title that I'm expected to express my views upon, I'm sure many of you may come with the presumption that I'll talk about the civilizational impact and the differentiation between the use of the nomenclatures India and Bharat. I am going to disappoint those people. If I reflect on the giant in the name of whom this lecture has been proposed, what is the one quintessential, this so-called ignored liberal, said about our democracy? He said that if responsible government is to be maintained, electors must be made to feel that the power to apply proper remedy when there is misgovernance rests with the electors. And to pay homage and to speak in the shadow of that giant is indeed an honor for me. So why Bharat Matters? Let's look at the global context and realities we live in today. How many of you have currently a digital transaction app on your phones? Maybe a UPI or a Google Pay. Anybody in the room who doesn't? Oh, there's one lady. And she's the outlier that MIT Sloan never took into consideration. How many of you know how digital transactions came into being? A neuropsychologist in MIT Sloan, Preslek, spoke about this case and this study that he undertook with close to 200 students. The students were told to transact, some in cash, some financially, digitally, and then an MRI was taken. Those who transacted by cash were extremely conservative. Those who transacted digitally were a bit more adventurous. And after the MRI scan, it was found that when an individual pays by cash, a neural path is triggered in terms of pain. And people who captured this particular research ended up creating PayPal. Today, in our country at least, digital transactions as per year 23-24 amount to 18,000 crore rupees, growing possibly at the rate of 129% every year. So there is going to be 129% growth in a transaction phase, which makes you a bit more adventurous. Contextualize this. How many of you are into political economics and undertake research with regards to the same? In this room?
1% right there. Yeah.
And how many of you have heard of the Gini coefficient? All? How many of you know of its origins? Corrado Gini was a polymath and intellectual, and somebody who worked very closely with Mussolini. And he gave us the system, the methodology under which inequalities around the world can be measured. That being between the scale of 0 to 1. And when this inequality was proposed to be measured, what are the templates that used this very scale? One of the people whose practical competitive knowledge put to use the Gini coefficient was a gentleman called Tobias Levkovich. He was a strategist for the Citigroup. In the year 2006, Mr. Levkovich, along with 3 people, one of them of Indian origin, wrote an internal strategy report looking at inequalities that were increasing in the world within nations, but recognizing that inequalities between countries was reducing. He proposed an analogy called the hourglass. What was the hourglass? At the top of it were the rich, at the bottom of it were the poor. So he proposed an internal report to the biggest hedge funds in the world, which gave them the prototypes of products that are to be sold. The super rich in the hourglass were to be sold luxury, and the poor and the middle class were to be sold poverty products. Guess what poverty products were? High interest loans, payday loans, and today and when you come to JNU, you better be prepared with the numbers. Today, if I just look at the numbers of the hourglass and the hedge fund products that are being sold across the world, only in the US, high interest loans, one of the biggest pieces of the pie is student loans. 70% of all graduates use student loans. And as of 2023, student loans in the US, in fact 21, they stood at $1.73 trillion. Then there's also a component of credit cards, which was a part of the hourglass analogy. Credit card debt balance as of the fourth quarter of 2024 stood at $1.21 trillion. So why does Bharat matter? And why am I laying the field with these little explosives? What is the next buzzword that is often sold very discreetly so in the name of new adventures, new capacity? Mr. Mattoo was kind enough to talk about my recent adventure and trip to Davos. When I was at Davos, all the streets were abuzz with AI agents. AI agents that will automate 70% of workflows across the world. And guess who stands to be the most disadvantaged? Women globally. Of all the jobs women hold across the world, 70% of those will be lost to automation. And the minute Davos gets over, China sneaks in with DeepSeek. Today, in a world where AI is not only the new buzzword, but people now look at the possibilities of looking at it from the economic prism. What does the promise of AI hold for us? It is said that by the year 2035, AI will help add $957 billion to the Indian economy. In the next 10 years, AI will ensure that there is a 7.1 trillion contribution to the global GDP. But how many of us in the room and outside know the reality that even generative AI is not embraced right now in most of the regions that showcase their presence in this very lecture room? Let's talk about Africa. The lowest income groups, nations in the world have an internet penetration of only 30%. In Africa, out of every 5 to 6 women, only one has an internet connection. And why do these numbers matter? Some may feel that this is a problem for Africa and not an Indian challenge for us to deal with. It matters because what we know as generative AI is the scraping of all information across the internet, including your personal information, without a promise of preserving your privacy. So what happens when AI becomes an ingrained part of your lives? Preeti ji was kind enough to reflect on my executive education with Berkeley Haas. A lady at Berkeley Haas initiated a very pragmatic paper. She had the same bank account as her husband. In fact, less expensive, more savings than him. Was very erudite with her tax filings and her tax knowledge. They both applied for the same credit card. She got a spending value 20 times less than her husband. The only difference is that the husband was a very renowned coder who ended up supporting web-based development of apps across the world. And the people giving out that credit card were Apple and Goldman Sachs. So this husband, outraged, approached them and said, "My wife earns as much as me, spends less than me, is absolutely spectacular with her credit score. In fact, her score was better than the husband. But the spend that she is allowed is 20 times lesser." And while he outraged on X, formerly Twitter, suddenly another man spoke up, who was one of the first inventors for the first Apple product with Steve Jobs. And he said, "Guess what? Even my wife." So while in India, especially in Indian media, there was a very famous interview which spoke of the tyranny of distance, not many have computed the tyranny of algorithm. Why Bharat matters is that, as has been pronounced by the Honorable Prime Minister, at the AIS Summit in France, we speak about responsible AI. And what is that responsible AI we speak of? Not many have reflected on it. So apart from credit card scores and spends, how is AI affecting our world today and the future we all hope to be a part of? The automotive industry uses AI to test safety measures. And one of the aspects of testing safety measures is to see what happens if the driver in the driving seat meets with an accident, what happens with the airbag explosion, how does the body get hit, what can be done to enhance safety within just a car. But what was found is that the anatomy of a woman was never considered. Forget the anatomy of a woman, the anatomy of a pregnant woman who's more at risk was never considered. And research found that in the same circumstances, at the same road, at the same speed, because AI did not consider this physicality, women are suspected to have a death risk which is 44% more than men. So those who think AI is all about computing workflows, it's also about lives that can be saved or lives that were deliberately put on the path of destruction. Why Bharat Matters? The next time we host our colleagues globally on issues of AI, can we delve deeper into what that technology means for those who are democratically disenfranchised? Why Bharat Matters? We are a nation of innovators and frugal thinkers of scientific temper. So the next time we host our friends globally on issues of science, on issues of technology, can we introduce the humane aspects that many across the world may have missed? Today, as an Indian, subject to correction by Dr. Mattoo, we speak in 16,000 dialects. We have 125 languages which are constitutionally recognized. Technology speaks barely 1 or 2 languages. Why Bharat Matters? Is that the next time technologists across the world meet in Bharat, can we talk about the knowledge systems we have lost because technology doesn't speak our tongue? Why Bharat Matters? Today, if I look at just numbers, it is said, and this is again subject to Bloomberg being corrected, that if India grew just at 1% more, then by 2028, in the world economy, our contribution will be 25%, China will be at 23%, US will be at 7.7%. But how do we use our money? Why Bharat Matters is, though we are the most populous nation in the world, our contribution to global economy before we were colonized, again subject to correction since I'm in JNU, was 25%, down 4% by the time the British left. We are now at 18%. We fought wars. We suffered famines. We struggled during the pandemic. We were colonized. We were brought down to 4%. We have risen to 18%. We can go back to 25% by 2028. That's why Bharat matters. And I say this because we have been tested as people. We've had emergency imposed on us, but we never rioted. We waited for the next time when we got the opportunity to vote. You'd be surprised, and again, this is something that you can look up. In England, I believe in the year 2007, the Ministry of Defense gave out an opportunity to somebody within the ranks to do a report on what will transpire if there is civil disobedience. The report said that if there is civil disobedience, the only thing that will fuel this as fire will be inequality. And true, in 2011, major British cities erupted in riots. Why Bharat matters is that irrespective of the conflicts we have lived in, we have still ensured the power of the vote. Why Bharat matters is exactly what Hriday Nath Kunzru said. That the people of Bharat know that for every act of misgovernance, those in governance can be called to justice, can be called to answer by just the power of the vote. So for those who presumed that I will talk about civilizational capacity of Bharat, let me leave you with this. The only civilization, and truly so, we speak about gender equity today. Of the 968 million who are constitutionally empowered to vote, 642 million in the year 2024 turned up to vote, of which 300 million were Indian women. Why Bharat matters is that when we were declared independent, women did not chain themselves to a seat in parliament to get the right to vote. I don't say we live in a utopian state. I don't say we live in utopian times. But why Bharat matters is that we have a sense of utopia. And that is a privilege, that is a dream, that is an anticipation that we all work towards. So I'm grateful for the opportunity. I'm hopeful to learn more.
Thank you very much, ma'am, for that absolutely mesmerizing, brilliant address. Thank you so much. And for all those who are expecting a lecture on the civilizational values of ancient Bharat, here is the corrective from and the fantastic speech by Madam Irani. And would you like to take some questions, ma'am?
Sure.
Questions, comments, faculty and students both? What happened? Are you all... yeah, that's right. Please go ahead.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Hriday Nath. I'm doing my Masters in International Studies from SIS JNU. Thank you so much, ma'am, for such an insightful session. I would like to ask a question regarding the present relevance of Bharat. So, we have, ma'am, you have mentioned about the voting rights and how women, gender equity, it is happening. Okay, all around the world we are seeing that, okay, women are taking the power positions and the leading role. But when I talk about India's relevance, I see that women still in rural areas, they are not getting rights. They are still in a subjugated position. And also we have seen that how there are a lot of cases being risen when it comes to sexual harassment. So when we look at these issues, when I talk about the Manipur issue, when I talk about the RG Kar, there are a lot of issues which India needs to address. So there are a lot of internal issues. So how we look at it, and then how Bharat matters for the world. Because we are still not able to solve our internal issues. Thank you.
Why Bharat matters is that if you look at the issue of equity, in Arthashastra 3000 years ago, maybe, if you look at even the edicts, you will find that if a man sexually harasses a woman at work, the king has a framework of punishing that man for harassment. The irony is that we passed the Sexual Harassment at Workplace Bill in 2013. I did not say that things are utopian the world over. Because that would be foolhardy. And it would be extremely inhumane of me to compute per capita rape for every country or every region. What gives me solace is the fact that you have a judicial system at work, that you have a free press, and today technology democratizes views and exchange of views and opinions. So while many countries across the globe have their own challenges, we are the only country, when we got the G20 presidency, we made women-led development a part of the leadership declaration, ensuring that the G20 leadership commits to the issue of equity and equality. It is not as if great nations did not have an opportunity before us in their presidencies. The fact that we measured up is why Bharat matters.
Dr. Manish?
Thank you, Madam Irani, for a brilliant address. You're talking about gender equity. You're a politician, so looking at the state of Indian politics, what are the challenges you see for gender equity in the political arena?
I don't.
No challenges.
I don't. Because it is rare to find a man who is in politics when he is asked, what would you do for men? A politician is supposed to serve every gender, every community. Why is it that you have an expectation on only female politicians to talk about the challenges of women? Next time you genuinely believe in equity, ask a man that question.
What is what saying in terms of the representation of women later?
So we have 1.5 million women who are elected to office in our panchayats, which is the largest in the world. And fighting an election in a panchayat is one of the toughest elections you can be a part of, because the cohort of voters is small, the complexities of communities are big, and then comes the challenges of your own family systems. So those 1.5 million women who are elected and another 1.5 million possibly who fought that election, those 3 million women is what is great about women in politics in India.
Yeah, I noticed you, but I thought for once I'll give the faculty the first right. Professor Shrabni? Yeah, I mean, you can ask a question.
The only outlier with
And
no
Dr.
digital
Abhishek.
app
And then I'll come
on
back to
financial
you.
transactions.
Yeah, I do not use digital app for simple reason I've had family who have suffered from it, and I still hope that our country will rise up in rank and be able to protect the millions who get
Scammed.
Yep.
fake calls, etc. And I think we've done a wise job by bringing it into the national, when you these days call up, you get
Yep.
this information. I think that's a very good, sensible way of trying to educate the absolute millions who are very much using this app. I have rather a question of, you have addressed it, that so many people will, are not going to be in the ecosystem of a digital world. And it is something that is going to challenge every country and us more so. We do have certain set of policies in place right now which are looking towards inclusivity. However, my understanding of these policies that are being put forward seems to be, not being able to capture what is happening at the ground level. I don't know whether you will be in a position to answer this.
Ma'am, I think that one of the greatest fallacies that we propound about democracies is that it has to be only the government at work. Government is just one but pillar of a democracy. It is a participation, it is an amalgam of forces across between citizens, bureaucrats, politicians, the justice system, the legal system, the police system. So while you talk about policy's existence, the issue of permeating that policy to ground realities also rests with us. For instance, if people who are of public nature, today there are many who subscribe to a particular financial instrument because that financial instrument is proposed by a company so-called of repute or a celebrity of repute. What are the contexts that they need to genuinely look into before they prescribe it to others? So that is why I say that the challenge is that democracy is not only government at work, it's also people at work with the government.
Dr. Abhishek?
Thank you so much, ma'am, for your thought-provoking lecture. Bharat Matter for Global South. And India, now Bharat is trying to balance...
So Abhishek, that's what I'm correcting you. Bharat matters for the world.
Yes, now I'm coming to the question, ma'am. So,
We can lead the voice of the global south, but the global north is very aggrieved. They may not want to step down from the pedestal they are at to acknowledge their problems.
thank you so much, ma'am, because you absolutely picked my question, that how Bharat will balance between global south and global, the aspiration between global south and global north. On many topics like climate change and other questions, there is huge gap and very huge gap between agenda of global north and global south. And
There is
India
no gap of agenda, there is a gap of intent.
Yeah, intent, sorry. So how India will balance?
I think firstly, we have the institution and capacity of institutions of the global north. We have an understanding of the institutions of the global north. And because we are in the global south, we understand best the challenges of the global south. And that is why Bharat is well positioned to be the bridge between the global north and the global south. Insofar as sustainability, I always believe that make an economic evidence-based conversation around issues that need most attention. For instance, you speak about sustainability. Today, if you look internationally, global sustainable businesses are valued at around $24 to $25 billion. But if you look at the climate agenda, there were promises made to Bharat that the climate agenda or the climate standards we are to meet will be financed by the global north. That is a promise not anybody kept. Bharat matters, but most importantly, Bharatiyas are proud of the fact that we met our climate goals out of our own money. But it's time for the global north, south, and everybody to walk the talk. So we need to ensure that if sustainability for us civilizationally is a way of life, we also need to ensure that sustainable businesses thrive. For instance, if you look at our consumer spend and how consumers oscillate towards homegrown brands, today digital e-commerce platforms are the buzzword, let's say for urban centers, for people to pick some of the choicest consumer goods. You'll be shocked that most of the traction for new goods is coming from semi-urban rural areas, 63%. And of that, when they saw the consumer psychology as to what is that point because of which they pick a particular brand, price is just one of those points. 60% of them actually support homegrown brands. And homegrown brands that are sustainable also find consumer support. The issue is, are we informed on those data points? So I believe that sustainability, if you make an economic case for it and evidence it as a part of a great business opportunity, then us being the biggest consumption market in the world, it's a win-win for the environment and for business.
I'll take two more faculty questions and then I come back to you. Professor Amit Shubhan Ray and Professor Baba.
আপনার কি জিজ্ঞেস করছে আর কিছু আপনি বলুন He's hoping you ask a question.
He's a political economist, so I thought he'd...
Sorry, I have lost my voice.
No problem.
As I said to one of my colleagues,
Academicians losing voice in front of politicians doesn't augur well. But
but I have been voiceless for quite some time. So figuratively,
No, not since I became dean.
but ma'am, I must compliment you for an excellent presentation.
Thank you, sir.
And highlighting the importance of political economy in understanding why Bharat matters.
I think that is one of the contributions academicians can actually bring forth. One is understanding of political economics, and the other is organizational behavior.
Absolutely, ma'am.
If these two things find much merit in academic circles and especially are something that students delve into. It's a great contribution academically to their lives and their futures.
If I may just pose one
Yes,
comment to you, ma'am. In fact, I delivered a lecture on why international political economy matters, and I concluded by saying that we have to accept the reality that we are indeed moving towards a multipolar world, and India is definitely one of the poles, if not a very important pole. So it is important for India to align itself not with one or more poles, but to strike a very slippery slope balance. And that's a foreign policy challenge, given the current international political economy. Would you have some thoughts
I think
on
we've
that?
managed to reach that crossroad and very well so by somebody who was an alumni. No?
Absolutely.
So I think Mr. Mistry is also scheduled to
yeah.
speak. I think we are now in a multipolar world. We are not progressing towards it. And I think that we have come to that pass. But I believe now in the new US presidency, even multipolarity will be redefined. Engagement, especially in our region, will be I think, in some way rejudged, in some way readdressed. I also believe that information like the ones that I shared today is available, but is not something that is reflected on, especially by citizenry. And that is, I think, there the opportunity where the discourse for us as politicians and bureaucrats can be in fact pushed further if citizens are informed on these crevices, which are actually the very foundation of the multipolar world you talk about.
Professor Bao.
I'm your audible, so I can.
It's just like, thank you, ma'am. Thank you for that very brilliant 25-minute, sharp, to the point, something what probably people will take away how you want to speak without having a talking notes. It's something which we
did
all
have notes, but I
you
didn't
have
look
to
at them.
refer to it. So I mean, that has to be placed on record because this is something so powerful. It's not just about getting women to the table, but getting the voice to the women. And I just
Well,
want
ma'am,
to,
I've always said women have a voice.
yeah, but
The
then-
problem is they're not heard.
But today it was loud and clear. I want to come to the point what you mentioned and what the Prime Minister said in his, when he was in Paris for the AI summit, the two parts of the AI, artificial intelligence, but he also flagged aspirational India. And you see a section of that aspirational India here, and every university epitomizes that. And in that, you mentioned about the digital and what we do and the transformative power. But something what stands out, and probably from your own personal experience, why Bharat Matters is, how has, in your opinion, this perception of India undergone a change? You know, that is something which is what makes India tick very differently in different parts of the world. And in your engagement, where do you see that shift happen?
Being unapologetic. I think somebody who was born in this city and who didn't come from a very financially affluent family, I introspected on this, and again, this is my personal view, that when the Prime Minister speaks about aspiration, as a community, how have we addressed that very word? How do we bring up children in our communities? How do the affluent bring up their children? The affluent never burden their child with the guilt of consumption. The affluent never burden their child with the guilt of getting more. It is the middle class, the lower middle class, the poor who teach their children to be satiated. I was recently speaking to some students in Tamil Nadu, and the striking response to one of my interactions was when I told them, don't be afraid to be rich. Because when you've been lower middle class, when you've been poor, you know how to share. Because that's the quintessential community value that is bestowed on you. So even if you look at the city report of 2006, it talks about the hourglass. Why? Because the rich will use more of their money for their luxury. It is the poor and the middle class, when they grow, when they are aspirational, when they are unafraid to make it financially, they still know how to share. And this is a case for social psychology. You can actually study this, and I'm sure you'll lead to the same conclusion. It is always the middle class, the lower middle class, who only has that limited aspiration of that ek ghar, ek gadi, acha bank balance. We have our educational institutions that teach our children to go from paycheck to pension. And it's the Whartons of the world that teach them how to create valuation in stock markets. So I think when the Prime Minister speaks about that aspirational India, as somebody who himself came from a very poor background, he knows the psychology which is embedded into the young. Don't be afraid to achieve. You will fall. You will fail. What we teach children in middle class or middle class or poor families is you can't afford to fail. So I think that is the aspirational India, which doesn't fear failure, knows how to build on it, which doesn't guilt trip on consumption, but knows how to share. And that is the India that needs more strength.
Final question.
Good afternoon to all. Myself, Kelvin Benny, PhD candidate in Center for West Asian Studies. First of all, thank you, madam, for the inspiring lecture. Actually, regarding my doubt, I am comparing India with China because we both of us have 100 crore plus population. But when we look China, they efficiently use their internal market and their best talent to create their own Google, their own YouTube, their own WhatsApp, DeepSeek. But regarding case of India, unfortunately, our best brains are working as CEOs in West or USA, and we can't also properly use our internal. As of now. So what can we do to emulate Chinese success in such technology?
You are comparing a democracy with a communist state. Would you tell me that you would rather embrace communism? So I believe that in insular economy, where not much information is available for you to truly make a judgment, your judgment right now is made on the basis of the PR that you hear. How many of them have the free will to work where they work and how they work? So what happens and this is with all due respect to countries across the world, a country had the origins of a pandemic. Your country had the origins of the vaccine, which it gave to 160 countries, and that's why your country matters.
Thank you very much, ma'am, for that really inspiring address and interaction. May I now request Dr. Titli Basu to give a formal vote of thanks.
Thank you, Dean, Professor Mattoo. As we gather here today to draw the curtains on 2025 edition of Pandit Hriday Nath Kunzru Memorial Lecture Series, I think we all agree that the depth of academic debate and discussion that we had throughout the week and particularly as my colleague Professor Preeti has mentioned on why international relations matter has not only fueled our intellectual appetite, but it also kind of pushed the latitude of future research in this university and beyond. I would extend my deepest gratitude on behalf of the school, behalf of Dean and the convener of this lecture series, to Honorable Srimati Smriti Irani ji for her very sharp, incisive and very innovative take on a very complex topic of why Bharat matters. And let me tell you, madam, you have very pleasantly surprised us for not taking the predictable path of analyzing through the prism of civilization. It's most welcome. Your eloquent delivery, I believe, capturing the brilliance of Bharat will resonate in the campus conversation, I'm pretty sure, and beyond in the days to come. It is my pleasant duty to, to extend our deep gratitude and our respect and thanks to Honorable Vice Chancellor, Professor Shanti Sri Pandit, for her unfailing support as we celebrate 70 years of our school this year. And also we thank Professor Pandey and the entire administration for helping us every step of the way. The intellectual tempo of our school, I think, under the leadership of Professor Mattoo, has grown many folds. And we thank you, sir, for your continued guidance and lending us your academic excellence in shaping the future of the school. I also thank all our colleagues who have taken their time out and participated in enriching the conversation through the week. And lastly, it is my absolute pleasure to thank Team Kunzru, led by our very dear Professor Preeti Singh, who has navigated various challenges with a big smile on her face. And most importantly, our dear students who define brand JNU for decades and will continue to do so in the years to come. We thank one and all, and we expect to host you again in the coming year, 2026 Kunzru Lecture Series. So thank you all.
Thank you. Volunteers. Come. हमें क्या करना है?
अरे फोटो के लिए जाओ, बाहर वो स्टूडेंट्स जा रहे हैं, टीम जा रही है। चलो वॉलंटियर्स का फोटो।
All volunteers make off turn.
May I request all the volunteers to please step out for a photograph? Thank you.